Hello, you're very welcome. This video is to hopefully get you introduced to one of the new MIDI effects, and this MIDI effect is called Bouncy Notes, and it's part of the Inspired by Nature pack that you can download from the Ableton site from Ableton 11 onwards. And yeah, there's so much good stuff within this. It ties into a lot of stuff that I would be interested in, so I thought I'd do a video on it. And essentially, it takes inspiration from nature and physics and science and how these things kind of collide together and how you can incorporate these aspects of real life world scenarios and simulations into the likes of Ableton and instrumentation and sound design. It's absolutely fascinating, and there's so much that you can do. The one that we're going to look at is a MIDI effect. So there's basically audio effects, instruments, MIDI effects. There's some presets and samples in there as well. But specifically, we're going to look at Bouncy Notes. Essentially, it's the one that I've used most so far. Not to say that it's better than any of the others, it's just the one that I've used first. So I want to cover this first of all, and I will cover a lot of the others as I go along. But yeah, there's just so much you can do with this. Kind of in a nutshell, you can use this as a sequencer, a random note generator, a random sequence generator. You can use it on drums, you can use it on samples, you can use it on, synthesizers, kind of whatever you want, really. And yeah, that's really vast. There's a lot of stuff in it, to be totally honest, but that's good. It means that it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, you probably have to sit with this for quite a while to get your head around the aspects of each and every aspect of the Bouncy Notes MIDI device. But, I'll go through most of it today, and I'll go through the main functions first, just to get you up and going. So I'm going to explain a couple of bits and pieces. That section that you just heard a second ago has been completely generated by the Bouncy Notes. So essentially what I've done behind each and every, I'll just take this down a second so you can see. So behind each and every channel, we essentially have either a melody or bass or percussion or drums, right? So behind each and every channel here, bar this channel, which is just a kick drum, the Bouncy Notes MIDI effect is generating MIDI data, and that MIDI data is then been churned out and it's triggering something. In this instance, it is a that's just literally operator playing one sine wave, one oscillator, one sine wave, and I've put a tuner here so you can see what it's generating. If I turn this off, we get nothing. So this is literally generating the amount of voices that are played at once. And then also it's using, again, real world scenarios like gravity, the size of something, the speed of something moves through gravity, and so on and so forth, and how all of these things tie together to basically generate multiple rhythms within a set structure that we create. So at the minute, I have this set to a particular pitch structure and also a particular rhythm structure. So that's really important to kind of get your head around that side of things. So if you don't have this, if you leave this completely wide open, the likelihood is it's going to be chaos, which again, you get in nature. But essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make this slightly more musical. So I've set a few restrictions there to kind of pull it in a wee bit so we can, make it and use it within a musical construct, I guess. But I'm going to show you how to do that now in a wee second. So this is the first sound. You can actually, just to give you a heads up before we start, you can actually use Bouncy Notes to generate notes for you. Therefore, you don't need to send it any MIDI, but you can also send it MIDI, and then it'll take that MIDI, play that MIDI note, and also play more notes, along with it as well. It depends on which way you want to go. We'll actually have a look at both scenarios because I think it's important to basically see the different ways in which you can interact with it. So first of all, if we have a look here what's going on. So at the minute we have this set to auto, and if we have it set to auto and we press play in Ableton, it will start generating notes. So let's have a listen. If I turn auto off, the notes will disappear because there's now, when you've auto turned off, it's waiting to receive MIDI information to play. Therefore, if you want to send in a MIDI clip, I have one here. So this is my MIDI trigger. There's literally just a few notes in here. It's all it is, just a standard MIDI clip. And once I play that, that should now trigger this. Okay. So if I have it set to auto and I turn this off, it's now Bouncy Notes generating the MIDI note or the MIDI data, right? But if I turn this on and I have this turned off, now it's waiting to receive MIDI information, and based on that MIDI information, it will play that note, but it will also play more. Now I have a bit of reverb and delay on, so let's turn that off. So this is what it's actually generating, and that's based on the MIDI data that's coming in. But if you have a look, you know, we don't have that amount of MIDI data in there to play those notes. So how is it doing that? Well, basically what we're doing is we're adding, you know, nearly like echoes or delays or repeats of those particular notes and more notes as well. So we'll have a look at that in a wee second. So again, auto, you have this on for Bouncy Notes to generate MIDI data for you, or off if you want to use your own MIDI data. So then we have the drop section here at the very top where it says press or release. So essentially what this is if you were to press a MIDI note, it drops the ball when you release the note. But if you have it at press, it drops the ball as soon as you press the note. So that's really important too, because you can create lots of different rhythms based on that. So let me slow this down. There's a speed section here. I'm going to slow this right down. So I'm going to change this to press. So as soon as I press a note now on the MIDI keyboard, it's dropping a ball on a note down here, right? Now, if you don't see this, you need to go and turn on your piano roll or turn it off. So it's, you know, you can see your piano roll now. So if I press a note, it's giving you a visual cue as to which notes are being activated by the ball bouncing, and whatever gravity and mass and speed that we have set up within this window will dictate how long the ball lasts for, how you know, how quickly it moves around and hits different notes, and what size the ball is as well. So that's the mass, right? So if we take that mass down, all right, and obviously the smaller or bigger something is, the more or less gravity will actually pull something down. So that's something to be aware of as well. So if we have lots of gravity, it goes straight down and we get one note. Right? If I take gravity up a little, with the amount of force it uses to bounce off this, it can go back up again, and you know, you get multiple notes out of one play. And then the speed, we'll have those moving around much faster. All right. So these work together. All right. So hopefully that's simple and straightforward enough so far. So if I want to restrict these notes, which I have done already, but if I want to restrict them, I can do that too. So say if you want to restrict them to a scale, a musical scale, what you can do is you can activate your piano roll or deactivate your piano roll, and then it takes you into a setting where you can set a scale. So major, minor, and so on. I've just kept it very simple, and I've went for a C major scale, right? And the start note is D, but I could change that to whatever I want by clicking up or down, clicking and dragging up or down, and I can take that to C, and then once I go to auto, now this rhythm is different compared to what it was. Now if you're struggling to get anything rhythmical, I'm going to just leave everything over here and hop over to this side a wee second. You've got to, so we've quantized basically we've quantized the pitch so far by setting a scale and a tonic and a starting point and then a range. So the range is like, I have it set to 12, so that's 12 semitones. So it's playing a C major scale, starting off at C3, and it'll play up or down an octave, right? That's basically what it's saying. So then we hop over here and we can quantize now the rhythm of playback. So if I click and drag this right down, it's free, right? So that's really sporadic. So if I was to try and play that along with the rest of the track, it probably wouldn't work, right? But if I start quantizing the rhythm of the way the notes actually, you know, come out the other end and go into operator. So if I set that to 16ths, it's now rhythmically correct and harmonically correct. So that's the two main things. This is your way of filtering this and just trying to keep it under some type of control, but allowing randomness to take part as well, right? So we've synced the rhythm, and we've also synced the pitch now to something that we know is going to work with a track. This track is in C major, just to keep it simple for now. Okay, so that's that side of things, right? So we can quantize this both in rhythm and in pitch. Now, if we have a look at some of the other preset, or some of the other settings within this, so this is basically our standard setup. I guess we need to look at voices and lifetimes as well. This is really important. So basically, voices is the number of balls that can exist at once within this window. So if I have this set to 10, that's saying that 10 balls can exist in here at any one time. All right, so that's going to give you a lot more rhythm, or a lot more pitches. All right, if I take this down, now it'd be 6 or 2. Now, it's not making a massive difference. But if we were to take, this up to 3 and start putting in loads, you would get lots more, because we're quantizing the output, the rhythm output as well. That has a massive impact on everything else. So that's basically what that's telling you. Now, the lifetime one's really interesting. Lifetime sets the note length that balls will exist for, because when this ball exists and it bounces down here, it's going to play a note, and it could bounce off it and hit off a wall and bounce back again and give you another note. So the lifetime, the life cycle of a note is really important. So if I take the speed down and take the voices down to 1, just so we can see this. Right, so it's not hitting the bottom at the minute, so let's take gravity down, or up. Right. So now if I take the lifetime over to the left, the balls they're not living long enough to go from where they're dropped from to where they need to go to trigger a note, right? Therefore, we're not getting any sound. But if I go over to the right, these notes will last longer. These balls will last longer. They'll stay in the window for longer. So that's basically what it's referring to, right? So let's take up the speed a wee bit now. So everything works like one ecosystem, and again, it's clearly the way that the environment works as well. You take out one thing, everything else falls apart. You take the whales out of the sea dies. So it's kind of playing on that type of mindset where everything is connected and everything has an effect on everything else. Think of a deck of cards. You pull one card out, everything can fall down. So that's kind of what's going on. So it does take a lot of time to get your head around it, but hopefully that makes sense so far. So then if we have a look at, so we've looked at the likes of speed, gravity, and mass. So speed affects the speed of the entire simulation without affecting dynamics. Then below speed we have friction. So friction reduces the force of the gravity over time of a ball's life, right? So having a little bit of an effect. Then if we look at the next one, which is velocity equals gravity. So this, if you had a MIDI note on, so you need to have this on here and this auto turned off, so now it's the MIDI that's basically triggering this simulation. And what it can do is it can read the velocity in here. So if you were to take these down and vary them a wee bit, that would now impact the actual gravity. So it's the velocity of your MIDI notes now that is affecting the gravity, if that makes sense, right? And you can increase how much of an effect that has or how little. You can go positive and negative here as well. Quite a lot to it. Then we also have velocity versus mass, and it's the same thing as well. The velocity can determine the mass. So both gravity and mass also affects the overall dynamics of the simulation. So there's quite a lot there. So velocity mass allows the MIDI note velocity to affect the mass of the balls for more variety. So if you have, if you increase the mass, there's going to be more variety within the balls, right? And also then if we go for velocity mass, that's going to really kind of mix things up a wee bit. So you should see different size of balls coming in here now as well, based on the velocity that we have here, right? So that's basically what it's saying. Okay, so that's quite a lot. We'll just stop and breathe there for a wee second, I guess. Next up then, we have ball behavior, right? So if we didn't have enough control already, we have quite a lot more. So there is two settings that we have here. So first of all, yeah, we have the behavior of the ball when it hits the floor, which is down here, the piano roll section, and also the side walls, right? So bounce allows the ball to bounce off the walls on the sides, okay, and the ground. Warp, the ball warps around to the other side, in this case of the floor. This is to the height dropped from. So if we can have a look at this now, and if we start moving some of these around, so if I go to bounce, I'm gonna warp. Right, you can see that that's affecting the movement there now. Alright. So we have bounce, we have warp, and we have random for the first one. Let's change it to random. So the ball basically appears at random locations here, so you get much more variation in your notes for this one. Bouncing off everything and randomly changing direction, essentially, with this. I quite like random. So let's go back to bounce. Right, not as much variation. Random, much more variation. Okay, so let's look now at the next one. So this is, again, this one's more related to where the ball actually comes in to the simulation. The next one is basically what goes on when it hits the side walls. And so we can warp that. We can randomize it again. So the same rules apply, only instead of it coming down, it's bouncing off the sides here. And then also we can just delete it. So I'm going to go random for both, for the fun of it. So basically, once it hits the side wall, the ball is destroyed if you go to delete. Right, so it's just a way of getting rid of balls, I guess. Let's bring up the amount of balls. Let's go to random. And take the gravity up a little bit. That's down a wee bit. Random directions. Cool. It's much more simplistic now as well. Right? It's just, it's absolutely endless. The stuff that you can do with this is just absolutely incredible. And you will get lost. And that's okay. Embrace that, I guess. Because there is just so much you can do. Let's bring up the mass here again a wee bit. And take the gravity down a wee bit. Increase the lifetime again now as well. So we're getting some more notes there now again. And because we've everything set to quantize the rhythm and the pitch, doesn't matter what we do, it's gonna be okay. So that's that. So there's something else that I want to show you in the central display, which is this section here. You can actually add blocks. So like say if we just take this down to one voice a wee second, or less voices anyway. Yeah, let's take it down to one voice, right? So what's going on here is the ball has been dropped at random locations. And what if I want to block the way that the ball moves, or kind of dictate what way the ball moves around the window? Well, I'm just clicking and dragging here, and I'm adding blocks. So now when a ball bounces off that, I can bounce off it and get stuck in here and roll down and then hit a note, and then bounce off this and hit another note. So it's kind of changing the rhythms. Now if I take quantization off, you'll hear this better. And turn up the speed. Maybe not that far. Quite interesting. Let's add a few more voices. Let's add all the voices. So then if I start quantizing this again, yeah, this one's stuck. So you get the idea. You can add blocks in there as well, and if you just double click them, they disappear as well. Right, so it's changing the sound a little bit. So the next thing that I want to show you is, I'm going to just go down to one ball again. And I'm just going to reset these by double clicking them. So there's less variety here now. And essentially what we can do is we can kind of move the direction of what's going on here in the center screen by adding some random direction and random velocity versus height. Right? So now you can see these balls are kind of moving at an angle rather than falling straight down. And let's add a few more. Alright, gets quite interesting. And that's just by moving the random direction of how the ball moves and using velocity to change the height. You can also use this bar here to dictate the height. So if I drag this right down, it's kind of reducing the amount of height that the balls have to move within. You also have one at the very top, and this is you basically dictating for it to move more towards the left or more towards the right, or just keep it in the middle. There's just so much you can do with it. It's absolutely incredible fun. It really is. So we've looked at it a lot for melody so far, and we're going to look at it now shortly in relation to using it in a drum pattern. I think that's really, really important as well. Before I do that, I just want to look here at the output MIDI settings, which is also really important. So this is set to, like if I set this to free, right? So it's not quantizing the rhythm. And what I can do is I can go up here now and set the note length to be either automatic, and then that's basically using what MIDI trigger that I've in there to kind of dictate the length of a note. But I'm going to just turn that off a wee second and change this to auto. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the note length to 16ths again. So it's slightly in sync based on the note length that we're using. So this sets the length of the output MIDI note essentially, right? So you can have it set to auto, and it'll randomly select it based on the random length that you have set here, or the MIDI note itself that you have within your MIDI clip. So then we have again random length, which is this one here, random length, and that adds random variety unless the auto note line is on, right? So if we go here, even if we have a length set here, this is still adding a wee bit of randomization to it. Alright, still a wee bit all over the place, so you will feel that I'd imagine, quantize it in some way, shape or form. But have a mess around with it. Even if you're not entirely sure what you're doing, you'll know when it sounds right. Okay, so again, the quantize free setting within that is basically whenever a ball hits a piano roll and a note is immediately output. So it's not quantized to a division of the tempo, for example 16ths, anything like that. Quantize can be set in sync to note lengths, which is here. And in that case, when you output MIDI to your synth or whatever it is that you're using, that will be quantized rhythmically. Fade out lowers the output, so MIDI note velocity is used, fade out here. So if we have a look at this, so this fades out the MIDI. So let's we take that right up. Right, so it's kind of fading out the life of the MIDI notes. So you can add a wee bit of variety there as well. Okay, so we're almost there. We've had a look briefly at these sections here, which is random direction and velocity is impacting the height, right? So random direction, first of all, this adds randomness to the directional force applied to the newly created and dropped balls, right? So if we don't want it to be random, they're just bouncing up and down now more, right? There's not as much variation there, but if we move that around, it moves around the sides and goes in different angles rather than just straight up and down. The velocity height allows velocity from the received MIDI notes to affect the dropping height of the corresponding balls. So if you want to really use this, you need to have your MIDI trigger on here. And this set that off. Right. Loads of variations. Finally, we have filter. Filter, this could be a handy one as well. So basically what happens is as soon as a MIDI note is received, so up here, if you trigger a MIDI note that doesn't match the pitch on the piano roll. So for example, we're in a C major scale there, and if I unfold this, I'm popping a black note. Once that note is received, two things can happen. If you have your filter turned off, what it will do is it will basically bounce that note to a note within your scale, right? If you have filter turned on, it just deletes it, doesn't take it on, it just kind of mutes it and ignores it. So it doesn't bounce it to another note that would be within your scale, it just ignores it. It just filters it out essentially. So that's something to be aware of, because that can come in handy as well. Again, it just gives you a different way of working with it, I guess. So if we then look at a velocity balance, which is this one here, velocity balance sets how much of the velocity or force of the balls when they hit the piano roll and how that determines the velocity of the output MIDI note. So there's two different types of velocities. For example, if the velocity versus ball is set to 0%, then when a MIDI note is output after hitting the piano roll, its velocity matches the MIDI velocity of the MIDI note that created the ball. So for example, if this velocity here is whatever it is, if I drag it's now at 68, well, that's what we'll get at the output if it's set to 0. If it's set to 100%, it's completely determined by the force of the ball when it hits the piano roll. So it's just, again, it's different ways to add variety to your sound. Okay, so if we look at 3, this is the next one. The 3 function is similar to a dry gain parameter in any audio device, but instead is applied to receive MIDI notes or MIDI in notes, right? So again, you can add some more variation to that. At 0%, received MIDI notes are not sent out at all, all right? So the default is 100%, I think, isn't it? Yeah, it's 100%. So basically, this is like nearly like probability. If you were to set an LFO on this at random, it would just move this up and down, and it would give you like a random chance type of output. So like sometimes, if you're right down here, it's less likely that your note's going to pass through and onto your synth or whatever you're using. But if it's up here, there's 100% chance. So that's basically what it's referring to. And then gain attenuates the velocity of the output MIDI notes when a ball hits a piano roll. All right. So again, this is to work with velocity. This is velocity gain. Let's have a listen. So we start on a bit of reverb, and a bit of delay. And think about how many things that we've moved in there, and that's still making sense within the track. So that's us looking at it from a perspective of using it with a synth. Right. Let's now look at it from the perspective of using it with percussion. If you're using this with drums or percussion or something like that, my advice would be to make sure that if there is anything in there that has pitch. So sometimes drum machines have some samples in there. Check out the pitch and then set your scale set your scale here to that particular pitch, if that makes sense. Now, at the minute, we've worked with scaling things down, but now we're going to go into drum rack mode. And essentially what this does is it looks at how many drums that you have within your rack, or how many instruments you've within your drum rack, or samples, whatever it may be. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if you were to count these steps, we have 10 steps across the bottom. If I turn that off, it doesn't happen, right? So it just knows how many samples we have in there, and it changes accordingly, which I think is really, really nice. So what it's going to do now is it's going to randomly pick these drum patterns for us. So let's have a listen. Right. Now I have one muted. If I was to delete that, you know, we'd have 9. You can see this updating. Everything else works the same way, so I won't go over it again. If I turn this off, I get nothing. So this is randomly sending MIDI out to each and every one of these samples that we have in the drum rack, but no more. It's not activating, you know, it's not playing, it's not trying to play the other 127 or 128. It's just playing the ones that we've in there, which is absolutely beautiful. It's really, even the one I just deleted, it knows that that's deleted now and it's not moving it. If you move it around, it knows where you've gone and it updates accordingly. That's a really, really nice thing with this. So again, as I mentioned before, you can use it as a random sequencer, an arpeggiator. It can trigger samples, it can trigger drums, it can trigger all sorts of things, right? Here's it triggering some weird glitchy stuff. So essentially I'll play this back, this sound back first of all. Or will I? Oh, I've already glitched that one out, have it? Let's just pull this over here a wee second. That's going to do the same thing. This is essentially water escaping down through the grass in my backyard. And what I've done is I've just brought it in here and chopped it up. So this is now what it sounds like. There's about I don't know, there's a load of different slices here, and what I'm doing is I'm using this to select each slice based on velocity. And so yeah, it's just a bit of randomization essentially. That's beautiful. It's a really nice way of doing it. So it's selecting which slice to play, and then it's playing it back based on the rhythm that I have set here. I won't go into that in too much detail, but I'll make this project available and you can have a wee look at that as well. So yeah, that's a brief introduction, I guess, to this. I've actually got some notes here for this that I'm going to share with you. Let me just get them on screen. So this is a PDF that I put together, and it basically outlines everything that I've just talked about. If you actually go to the guy that actually made these, so that's, I think it's pronounced Dylan Baston. Dylan has some stuff on his website as well, and like a lot of this information is taken from that, so you can have a look on his website and download it directly from there. Mine's is slightly different, but yeah, I'll make this one available as well, so you can have a look at that too. So I think that is pretty much everything for now. Hopefully you enjoyed that. See you next time. Peace.